Killzone Visual Design has art from all 6 Killzone games. It has images from various stages of the design process, but a lot of it is finalized concept art. Throughout the book, there's also commentary about why the developers designed things the way that they did. Overall, this is an exceptionally good video game art book. This review will cover the quality of the physical book itself, the content of the book, the aesthetics, and the nostalgia evoked by the book. I'll also talk about how it provides insight into the development of the games. Let's start with the quality of the physical book. The book's 9 inches by 12 inches. The pages aren't numbered, but by my count there's about 205. I really like the cover. I think it's pretty cool looking. It feels sturdier and tougher than most art books. And I think the quality of the images is probably above average. I'm not sure I've seen better printing. So overall, the quality of the physical book is exceptionally good. Alright, what's inside this thing? Well, some art is from early in the development process, but most of it is more finalized concept art. However, more than most video game art books, there's a wide variety of the types of art on display. For example, here's a pretty cool page with the business logos they designed for that nice city in Killzone Shadowfall. I think this page shows some of the humor of the design staff. Here's some artwork contrasting the two sides of Vecta, the Helghast and the ISA side. I thought this was a pretty cool 4-page spread. It shows the evolution of the ISA and Helghast soldiers. Here's a page with a bunch of guns and the material they're made from, and right next to that is an image of a gun exploded out so you can see all of the component parts. There are some rough 3D renders, like this one of the Boxcar City, and this page has something almost like a storyboard of how an explosion might affect a building. Is the book well organized? Well, it starts with an overview of the design philosophy of the developers, and then the rest is broken up into chapters. It has its own names for the chapters, but they're basically design philosophy, Helghast, Vecta, mechanical units like machines, guns, sci-fi stuff, and how they handle destruction. Is there any writing from the artists and developers themselves? Yeah, and when it isn't specifically from them, it's directly about them and the incidents that came up during production. Here's a couple of examples. While working on Killzone 3, one of Guerrilla's design leads brought a sketch for a new type of vehicle to a visual design meeting. They had talked about a chase scene earlier. The player would escape from an arms factory by way of a frozen lake, using some kind of transport to flee to safety. The design lead morphed these elements into a neat ice sailor, a fast escape vehicle on 3 skates, fitted with a big triangular sail. It took all of a minute for the idea to be shot down. One look at the sketches and the other designers knew something was off. Helghast don't sail, said one of them, closing the book on the topic. There was nothing wrong with the design itself, but as they assessed the vessel, they quickly realized battle-hardened Helgen soldiers would never have the patience to gently pull on the halyard, raise the sails, and luff to the weather. For the same reasons, Helgen designers wouldn't bother themselves with ice skating either. Eventually, the lead designer created a new design, a robust vehicle with chainsaw caterpillar tracks that bit into the ice, spitting flakes in the process. Deemed an appropriate Helghast tool, it made its way into the game. In a similar vein, it mentions that a developer wanted a Helghast boat to have life rafts, but that was simply refused outright. There were other anecdotes about how playtesting affected certain design decisions. The Helghast glowing eyes seem kind of strange from a story point of view. It doesn't seem very camouflage-worthy, but the eyes were only added after the game was in development, and we quickly realized it made the game much easier to play. Other things needed to go after that. At that point, we still had doors that had red lights on them as well, and that needed to go because people started randomly firing at doors. I think the writing is much better than average. The captions are less flowery and pointless than in many other art books, and they really accent the rest of the content. Okay, does this book have what you want it to have? Well, I'm quite biased in favor of books that offer insight into game development, so I really like the contents of this book. There's a ton of well-explained insight into the design philosophies of the developers. Having said that, a lot of the commentary was pretty broad, and it would have been nice if there was more commentary about individual images. Overall, I rate the content of this book to be pretty good. The main highlight is the great commentary. On to the aesthetics. Is there a pleasant layout to the book? Well, most of the pages are full page art, and the art itself is good. So, overall, it has a very pleasing layout, and it feels less clinical and spreadsheety than most other video game art books. I think it'd be pretty hard to argue that the aesthetics are anything but unusually good. I really like how many full pages of art there are in the book, including some multi page illustrations. I mean, I've looked through this book a few times, and I just am still very interested in it. I just really like looking at the images. Another thing worth mentioning about the aesthetics are the cover and the pages. They have sort of a matte finish, and it feels more pleasant and luxurious than most video game art books. As far as there being any weird issues with the book, well, there's a couple of clear pages that I think just don't really work. Like the one with the gun models, you just can't see them properly. All things considered, though, I don't really think this is a very big deal. Overall, I think the aesthetics of the book are exceptional. As for nostalgia, this book made me want to play all the games again to notice all the things I'd been reading about. I actually did replay two of the Killzone games after looking through the book. I mean, it made me like the series even more than I did before, so I would say it does a pretty good job at evoking nostalgia. Alright, on to the part of the review I call Backstage, which is about the little extras the book has about the games. So, I have a few points here. The intro mentions how all of the artists in the early days of the studio were graduates of industrial design schools rather than traditional art programs. So, they're industrial designers primarily. Because of this, they design the objects in the game the same way an actual physical product would be designed. I think this could be why Guerrilla Games' style is so unique. Throughout the book and in the introduction, it mentions how things are designed with form following function. In other words, they would think through how a tank would actually work and then design its appearance afterwards. I think most people probably didn't notice this attention to detail in the linear, brief Killzone games, but in Horizon Zero Dawn, now that's a great format for people to notice how talented the artists have been all along. The book also mentions that rather than simply having artists, Guerrilla Games has a visual design team that organizes everything about the game and how it should look and feel. There are some excerpts from their guidebook, which I thought was pretty cool. For example, it mentions how the Hellgas don't really care about visual aesthetics, just the function, and they were purposely made to look similar by wearing masks, and that would dehumanize them. That's how their government sees them, as expendable war assets. Another thing that I found interesting to consider was how the destructible environments in the Killzone games, which were actually pretty advanced for the time, that all became a key gameplay mechanic in hunting machines in Horizon Zero Dawn. One last thing for this section, there was a story that I thought was pretty interesting, where it talks about how in the very early stages of creating Killzone, which I think was in the early 2000s, the developers were deciding who would be fighting who. Maybe humans fighting aliens, or clones. Then they realized that the most engrossing way to highlight the issues of warfare is to have humans fight other humans. They decided to highlight this by naming the game Kin. But Sony said the game wouldn't sell on that name, and they named it Killzone. Yeah, Killzone, killing, missing the point. Well, in closing, I want to give a shout out to Cook and Becker for making this art book. Their approach is just so much more thorough than most video game art books. Most of these books seem like they're thrown together by people who don't really even know much about the game. But the people at Cook and Becker interviewed the developers, and they seem to really understand their mindset. I think all of their work really paid off for the final product. Well, different people want different things in video game art books, but I hope this review has been helpful in showing you what you can expect from this book. If you have any complaints about this video, please, please, please don't hesitate to contact my customer support center.